Well, good morning everyone. Today is Sunday. Come on, San Francisco, give me some better weather. I need some California sunshine before I leave in less than 2 weeks. So, my past week has been mostly exciting. Wait, let me rephrase that. It's actually been mostly boring. On 2 out of the 5 weekdays, I actually got the chance to do a lot of fun stuff with friends. But the other 3 were nothing, and more nothing. But today's different. The college that I'm going to, University of Pennsylvania, is actually hosting a reception for new students. It's being held in Hillsborough, just for the members of the class of 2015 who live in the Bay Area. So it's finally time to meet some new classmates.
Thank you.
Yeah. So that was a pretty cool reception. Met lots of great people and had some good food too. There was a caterer there. So right now I'm in Milpitas. My parents have a meeting thing. So today I want to look at and think critically about one of my favorite school subjects, psychology. But first, some dinner. Alright, first some background on what started to get me thinking about this topic. After I finished my AP Psychology course last year, this past year I've been picking up books about psychology. Malcolm Gladwell has since become one of my favorite writers, and a few days ago, this came in the mail, The Paradox of Choice, by psychologist Barry Schwartz. Today I don't want to so much talk about a specific psych topic, I want to examine some of the implications, one of the unintended consequences, if you will, of the science of behavior and cognition. I call this psychology, self-fulfilling prophecy. Oh, by the way, I'm at Great Mall. So one of the first questions we have to try to answer is, what does psychology try to do? Now that's a fairly difficult question, but I'd say that in general, psychology tries to identify different patterns in human and animal behavior. Now already there are 2 main problems with this science of psychology. Number 1, behavior is not objective. It can't always be put into numbers, so that means doing research in a psychology lab can be very different from doing research in, say, a biology, chemistry, or physics lab. But the second, and perhaps more interesting main issue, is that behavior is fickle. It can be influenced and changed very quickly. And that is exactly what makes psychology so difficult as a science. When you examine a psychology text, be it from a textbook or a book like this, you'll see that it tends to make a lot of generalizations. For example, it might say that many people tend to do X in response to Y, or there is a tendency for people to do Z. So after having studied and read some psychology, I've just begun to wonder, is it possible that identifying a behavioral pattern, which is what psychologists do, can actually perpetuate, increase that behavior? Now, let me give you an example. There was a psychology experiment done trying to answer the question, are people altruistic? So what happened in this experiment was that the researcher came up to 2 people, A and B. He would give A $20, and then he said to A, you can keep all of it, or you can give some amount of your money to B. This experiment found that on average, the A's would give about 25% of their money to the B's. So what was the conclusion from this experiment? Yes, people are altruistic, although later, redesigned experiments would challenge this claim. But for now, let's just ignore all those other experiments and focus on this one. So after all of this experimentation, the researcher concludes that yes, people are altruistic. So what happens next? Naturally, he publishes research papers, he appears in scientific journals, and of course in textbooks. Now the whole world can read about these experiments and conclusions, and what am I arguing happens after that? People can actually become more altruistic than they were before. Let's say hypothetically that you give about 2% of your income to charities. And then all of a sudden you're reading about these experiments in which the participants are giving away a quarter of the money they just got. What do you think about that? And this is just one of many possible examples in the world of psychology of what is called a self-fulfilling prophecy. That's simply the idea that if I believe something to be true, even if it isn't, my actions can actually influence it to become true. If I believe, based on flawed experiments, that people will give about 25% of their money away, even if that's not how it is in the real world, I can actually change that a little bit. I can change that simply by publishing and making people read about the results of my experiments. You want another example? I'll give you a quick one. There is evidence to show that the reason the placebo effect has gone up is because of increased drug advertising. In other words, since people are now more aware of what drugs are supposed to do, when they take a placebo, more of these effects of the real drugs can actually appear. So all of this self-fulfilling prophecy stuff presents one of the main problems of the science of psychology, although I don't really like to call it a problem, I like to call it a quirk. In psychology, you can technically never really know anything. Because human behavior can be so easily influenced, the act of discovering something can actually change the nature of reality itself. By discovering a behavioral pattern, I can actually change that behavior. That's crazy! You rarely ever see this in the fields of chemistry or physics, and I guess that's one of the reasons I like psychology. Even though it is an empirical science, it can be manipulated in so many surprising and unexpected ways. And that is what keeps me coming back for more. And that is all for tonight. Good night, everyone.